A 17-year-old boy, living in a van with his family, parked on a relative's lawn. Every morning, he'd wake up to the same crushing reality. No home, no money, barely any hope. But in his pocket, he carried something unusual. A check he'd written to himself for $10 million. This wasn't a joke. This was Jim Carrey's promise to himself. Jim Carrey's childhood in Canada was anything but funny. His father, Percy, was a talented musician who gave up his dreams to take a safe job as an accountant. But when Jim was just 12 years old, his father lost that job. Everything collapsed. The Carrey family became homeless. They moved into a van. Jim, along with his siblings, had to take janitorial jobs at a local factory just to survive. They cleaned toilets and mopped floors after school while other kids were playing. He was exhausted every single day, humiliated by his circumstances, and angry at the world. But even in those dark moments, comedy became his escape. It was the only thing that made sense. At 15, Jim started performing stand-up comedy at local clubs. He bombed his first show, badly. The audience booed him off stage. Most people would have quit right there, but Jim couldn't. Comedy wasn't just a hobby. It was his survival mechanism, the only light in his darkness. In 1985, when Jim was struggling to break into Hollywood, something inside him shifted. He drove his old Toyota up to Mulholland Drive, overlooking the lights of Los Angeles. He sat there alone, staring at the city below, feeling broken and defeated. But instead of giving up, he did something radical. He pulled out his checkbook and wrote himself a check for $10 million. In the memo line, he wrote, "For acting services rendered." Then he dated it Thanksgiving 1995, exactly 10 years into the future. He carried that check in his wallet every single day. It never left his side. It wasn't about the money, it was about belief. It was about deciding who he wanted to become, even when the world told him he was nobody. The years that followed weren't easy. Jim kept performing, kept auditioning, kept getting rejected. He worked on the sketch comedy show, In Living Color, where his wild comedy started getting noticed. But he wanted more. He knew he was meant for something bigger. Then came the breakthrough. In 1994, Jim Carrey starred in 3 massive films: Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. Hollywood couldn't get enough of him. He became one of the biggest stars on the planet. In 1995, just before Thanksgiving, Jim signed a contract for The Cable Guy. His salary? Exactly $10 million. The exact amount he'd written on that check. The check he'd written 10 years earlier had come true. Not because of magic, but because he'd decided it would and worked relentlessly for it. He'd visualized it every day. He believed in it when no one else did. When Jim's father passed away, he placed that worn-out check in his father's pocket at the funeral. It was a tribute to the man who taught him to dream, even when life gave them nothing. Jim didn't stop at success. He used his platform to inspire others. He spoke openly about depression, spirituality, and the illusions of fame. He once said, "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of, so they can see that it's not the answer." For Jim, the real victory wasn't the $10 million. It was proving to himself that a kid from nothing could become something. That belief, vision, and relentless effort could rewrite destiny. Jim Carrey's story isn't just about manifesting wealth, it's about resilience. It's about taking massive action even when you're terrified. It's about writing your own future when the present feels unbearable. Belief is a decision. Jim didn't wait for proof before he believed. He chose to believe first, then work to make it real. That check wasn't magic, it was a reminder of his commitment. Every audition, every performance, every failure brought him closer. Your past doesn't define your future. Homelessness didn't define Jim. He decided who he would become, and he refused to settle for less. So maybe you won't write yourself a $10 million check. But what will you write? What promise will you make to yourself? What future will you decide is yours, even if no one else believes it yet? Because if a broke kid living in a van can become one of the biggest stars in the world, Imagine what you can do when you truly commit to your dream. Jim Carrey once said, "You can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love." The question is, what are you willing to believe in? What future are you brave enough to write for yourself?